7. Jasmine Hartan. Jasmine Hartan is a well-known socialite and former real estate agent. The 32-year-old is believed to have shot Belizean Police Superintendent Henry Jamat. The mother of two had really been avoiding reporters for weeks when she decided to meet with 48 Hours, an American TV show, to exclusively discuss the night she shot and murdered a top government official in Belize. Towards the end of May this year, 2021, Hartan had captivated the attention of the whole country. So what happened on the day of the murder? After midnight, emergency responders discovered Jasmine covered in blood. She was on a lonely pier near the Great Beach Shore property where she lived with her husband, Andrew Ashcroft, the son of a British billionaire. Authorities also found Police Superintendent Henry Jamat, one of Belize's most influential and well-liked officers, in nearby waters of the Caribbean. He was dead. He had a gunshot wound behind his right ear, and the bullet was allegedly fired by himself. There were several speculations regarding Hartan and Jamat in the aftermath of the incident. Why were they on a pier by themselves, in the dark, at that hour of the night? Was it because of drugs, or was it infidelity? Hartan denied that the two were having any sexual relationship. However, allegations soon arose that she had changed her version of the story again and again, which fueled further curiosity. This case is a fantastic illustration of how a billionaire may abuse their power in the most heinous way possible. Hartan initially informed officials that Jamat had been shot by a stranger, possibly from a boat that was passing by. But later, she reportedly confessed to her attorney to firing the fatal shot herself. She said she fired at the officer accidentally. She went on to add that her buddy and well-wisher Henry Jamat had been pressing her to buy a rifle for personal protection. He had saved her from a near sexual assault just a week before. She said that they had been drinking before heading to the dock, where she gave him a shoulder massage. According to Hartan, Jamat was teaching her how to load and unload the magazine and bullets from his Glock 17 service handgun. She explained how it happened by accident, stating, "I'm holding it like this to the top and like this, and I'm trying to get the magazine out. Next thing I know, the gun went off." Hartan was charged with manslaughter by negligence. The family of Henry Jamat feels his death was the result of something much more heinous. A video of Hartan knocking off the head of a watermelon with a shotgun like a pro soon surfaced. So obviously she is not as naive as she claims to be. Investigators in Belize have not revealed any forensic details nor any other official documents in the case against Jasmine Hartan publicly. No trial date has been scheduled so far. As per the Belizean law, she could either be sentenced to 5 years in jail or might even walk free by buying her freedom. 6. Vijay Mallya. Former billionaire Vijay Mallya was a notable airline and liquor tycoon. But if you think he was well known for his business strategies, you're mistaken. This man is the very definition of what it is to be flamboyant. From excessive partying and a supremely elevated lifestyle, he had it all. Forget about owning a private jet. Mallya had a fleet of them. He was the founder and owner of Kingfisher Airlines. After a brief successful run, the business crash-landed and is currently inoperative. What followed was a chain of events that started with a tycoon claiming bankruptcy. Starting in 2012, it was found that Mallya was millions of dollars in debt, owing money to several banks, in an exhaustive attempt to keep his aviation company running. When the man went missing, all the banks, with the help of the government, put their heads together in a hunt like never before. But Mallya was prepared. He already had a foreign passport, which he gained after becoming a member of the upper house of parliament in India. Before anyone could get to him, he fled the country to the UK, leaving millions worth of debt unpaid for, and thousands of employees with an uncertain future. Mallya is yet to come back to India, despite the enormous effort by the government and the banks to arrest him. As per Business Standard, the entrepreneur is being accused of bank fraud and money laundering allegations, and legal action is yet to be initiated. Consequently, Malya will now have to give over all his payment cards as well as his remaining assets to a bankruptcy trustee. The trustee will identify his assets and liabilities. This appraisal will be utilized to pay back the bad loans incurred by the collaboration of Indian banks. Vijay Mallya's net worth was drastically lowered when a bankruptcy filing was utilized to retrieve over $1 billion in cash. That being said, he is still on the loose. A few journalists have even bumped into him on the streets of London, but apart from an attempt to get a quick word with him, nothing much has been possible. Will Mallya be extradited anytime? Will he clear off the debt? Only time can tell. For now, he seems to still live his billionaire lifestyle, although he officially claimed to have no money. We know he has billions intact. Somewhere. 5. Silvio Berlusconi. Silvio Berlusconi, Italy's former prime minister, has begun a year-long community service at a care center near Milan after being convicted for tax fraud. But this is not the first legal dispute he's got himself into. To avoid paying taxes in Italy, he and other executives purchased TV rights at exorbitant cost through 2 offshore firms in the early 1990s. In 2013, Berlusconi was sentenced to 4 years in prison, which was automatically reduced under a 2006 Pardon Act. Berlusconi was accused of paying for sex with an underage prostitute and misusing his power in June 2013. After serving 7 years in prison, he was prohibited from holding public office ever again. Nevertheless, he was allowed to remain free until the appeal process was completed. Berlusconi was convicted of paying for sex with Miss Maurung several times in 2010 when she was 17. And what is particularly shocking is he was still Italy's prime minister at the time. He was also found to have misused the powers of his position by arranging to have her freed from police custody after she was apprehended in a small theft case. Maurung was amongst more than 40 people questioned on suspicions of witness tampering in the case. In March, the new conviction showed that Berlusconi violated confidentiality and was again sentenced to 1 year in prison. He is revealed to have arranged for a police wiretap about a political competitor to be leaked and printed in a newspaper. The discussion took place between the CEO of Insurance Unipol and Piero Fassino, the leader of the major center-left party, and Berlusconi's #1 rival. Unipol was planning to take over BNL Bank in 2005. Magistrates had authorized the wiretap since they feared unlawful intervention in the takeover. Apart from these charges, another fresh trial cropped up in February 2014 in Naples. He was charged for attempting to buy a senator from another political party for a bribe of $4 million in 2006. A couple of other cases concerning bribing and tax evasions were also filed against him. But as of now, he's pretty much living it up still, most likely doing the same stuff as before. Do you think Silvio Berlusconi will continue to get away with his crimes? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. 4. Mikhail Khodorkovsky and Platon Lebedev. In 2004, Mikhail Khodorkovsky was the wealthiest man in Russia, and with $15 billion, the 16th richest person in the world. However, his luck ran out, as Khodorkovsky became his country's most renowned prisoner. How could someone go from being a billionaire to a prisoner? In 2003, he and his business partner, Platon Lebedev, were jailed for tax evasion. He lost his oil and gas business, Yukos, and was given a 13-year jail sentence after a contentious trial. Khodorkovsky alleges the sentence was influenced by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Khodorkovsky spent part of his term in a work camp in southeast Russia, where he wrote a 3-part essay on political and social duty entitled Left Turn. The partners were set to be freed in 2011, but were reconvicted on fraud and money laundering charges, which further piled on an additional 6 extra years to their sentence. On December 19, 2013, Khodorkovsky was finally released from jail due to his mother's ill health. Know how? Thanks to a generous pardon from Putin. Lebedev was released a month later. So the one who supposedly put him in jail was also responsible for releasing him. Think it was out of pity? Well, apparently there was something bigger going on. Khodorkovsky's release was presented as part of a Kremlin strategy to calm Western criticism of Russia's human rights record. The whole drama about releasing the billionaire unfolded right before the 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi. By releasing Khodorkovsky 8 months before completing his sentence, Putin was not able to release his old opponent on his own terms, but also arranged for him to be transferred out of the country. 3. RAJARATNAM. RAJARATNAM made his fortune as the founder of the Galleon Group, a hedge fund business in New York. In 2009, the FBI arrested him for insider trading, and a jury convicted him guilty of not one, but 14 fraud and conspiracy charges. The prosecution against RAJARATNAM encompassed 25 additional defendants, of which 21 pleaded guilty. It was primarily based on wiretaps, a strategy previously utilized against suspected drug traffickers and organized crime leaders, but was unique in investigations of securities fraud. During the trial, prosecutors revealed multiple recordings of phone calls. RAJARATNAM received or addressed inside information or gave guidance on concealing or covering up stock movements based on inside tips. The government said that RAJARATNAM had benefited or avoided losing more than $63 million with his use of inside knowledge. In 2011, apart from being sent to 11 years in jail, he was also forced to give up more than $50 million and pay a fine of $10 million. He was reportedly freed early in July 2019, allegedly owing to the First Step Act, which Kim Kardashian, among others, pressed President Trump to pass. The statute grants early release to nonviolent criminals who are over 60 years old or are terminally sick. Now, RAJARATNAM is claimed to be diabetic and living a quiet life in New York City under supervised parole. 2. Lee Jae-yong. Lee Jae-yong, known professionally in the West as J.Y. Lee, is a South Korean business billionaire and the chairman of Samsung. A South Korean court gave J.Y. Lee a fine of $60,000 for his illicit drug usage, handing a legal setback to the boss of the country's largest firm. After local media reports, a Seoul Central District Court spokesperson confirmed the penalty and 17 million won of extra forfeiture. During a recent court hearing, Lee had testified that he took the drug propofol 41 times during the 5-year time frame through 2020. Lee's defenders have claimed that he took the drug based on doctors' prescriptions, but accepted the prosecutor's charges. The Samsung tycoon was under psychological strain after the death of his father and was facing many claims of financial malfeasance. The 53-year-old has been caught up in legal issues for years, beginning with his workforce planning in 2014 when his father and Samsung chairman Lee Kun-hee had a heart attack. Lee was accused of using bribes to obtain support for his official succession at the corporation and jailed for 2.5 years before being released on parole. He now faces the threat of returning to jail if he is convicted of anything else. Allegations of his participation in financial crimes relating to a merger of the two Samsung affiliates in 2015 have him appearing in court hearings every week. Separately, authorities are probing further claims of tax cheating and concealing assets abroad after Yonhap News revealed a paper firm established in an offshore tax haven in 2008. Since he was released on parole in August, Lee has resumed managing Samsung and directing investment initiatives, including a $205 billion expenditure plan to develop the semiconductor business in Korea. He may also visit the United States shortly to confirm the chip maker's promise to establish an advanced chip facility on American soil. 1. Alfred TAUBMAN. Adolf Alfred TAUBMAN was an American businessman and philanthropist. In 2001, the former chairman of Sotheby's Auction Company was accused of scheming to set auction commission rates paid to U.S. sellers and was in breach of antitrust laws. The plot charged at least $400 million in charges from 1993 to 1999. TAUBMAN rejected the allegations but was still sentenced to a year and a day in jail. According to reports, Tennant was never tried since he could not be deported from London under English law. TAUBMAN, a millionaire who built shopping malls in America's suburbs, was sentenced to 9 months in prison. In May of 2003, he was freed. In his biography, Threshold Resistance: The Extraordinary Career of a Luxury Retailing Pioneer, he writes, "I had lost a chunk of my life, my good name, and around 27 pounds.
Number 11. Emma Jane Maxson. Emma Jane Maxson and her boyfriend James Knight were both in their 20s when they were thrown out of a taxi in 2016 for arguing after a night out drinking in Leicestershire, England. Earlier that night, James had been asked to leave a bar because of his concerning behavior. The couple continued to fight in the street and at Emma's home. At some point during the heated argument, the young woman stabbed Knight in the chest with a steak knife, and he died. On the surface, it may seem like Emma killed her boyfriend in cold blood during an uncontrolled fit of rage, but some domestic violence advocates saw the situation differently. Emma's mother, Joanne Smith, told the BBC that her daughter had changed throughout her relationship with Knight. She went from being bubbly and full of life to withdrawn and always covered in suspicious bruises. During her trial, Emma's lawyers argued that the relationship was physically and emotionally abusive. They accused James of using steroids and other drugs, claiming that the substances made him unpredictable and aggressive. Emma had miscarried before his death, and he allegedly blamed her for losing the baby. She said that she stabbed James in self-defense after he grabbed her by the throat and began strangling her, and that she never meant to kill him. She just wanted him to stop hurting her. Meanwhile, Knight's mother, Trish, denied that her son was a violent person. Emma's apparently unrushed efforts to get medical help for James sealed her fate. She underwent 2 trials and was found guilty of murdering him both times. Nobody but Emma will ever truly know what happened that fateful night, but she's paying for it. She'll serve at least 17 years before she's considered for parole. Number 10. Justin Medoff. 31-year-old law student Justin Medoff called the Las Vegas police last year after he allegedly awoke to find his girlfriend, 28-year-old Stephanie Duarte, beaten, bloody, and unconscious. Officers reported to the couple's hotel room to find it covered in blood after Justin reportedly bathed and tried to revive Stephanie. When emergency responders tried to perform CPR on the young woman, they realized that she was in rigor mortis, the state of decomposition where a body becomes stiff after being dead for several hours. Stephanie died by blunt force trauma to the head, sometime after both parties had argued while out in public, and returned separately to the hotel room. Hotel guests reported hearing the pair arguing between 2 and 3 o'clock a.m., and officers noticed red marks on Medoff's body. He eventually admitted that the two had argued while they were out, and that they went home separately. He continued to claim that he woke to find Stephanie bludgeoned and deceased. Police arrested Medoff for open murder with the use of a deadly weapon. It looks as though the aspiring young attorney's future has changed dramatically, as he finds himself on the opposite side of the law that he never meant to be on. Number 9. Heather Berry. Police in Visalia, California rushed to the home of Ramsey and Heather Berry last year after receiving a call from a resident who claimed that they'd heard gunshots and a man screaming for help. Officers found 47-year-old Ramsey outside on the ground with multiple gunshot wounds to his torso. They theorized that violence erupted during an argument about the couple's 2 children, who were both under the age of 10 at the time. The kids were at home when 43-year-old Heather allegedly shot Ramsey multiple times, leaving him critically injured but expected to recover. This wasn't the first time that police were called to the residence. In fact, they had been there several times before in response to domestic violence-related complaints. Records show that almost every year from 2014 to 2020, Heather had tried getting domestic violence protection from Ramsey for herself and their children. She's out on $500,000 bond while facing charges for attempted homicide and child endangerment. In the meantime, investigators are trying to determine exactly what happened and if Heather shot her husband in self-defense. Number 8. Woman beheads husband. A 50-year-old woman in the Indian state of Andhra Pradesh is making headlines for allegedly cutting her husband's head off with a sharp knife and bringing it to a local police station in a plastic bag. Identified only as Vasundhara, she reportedly got into a heated argument with 53-year-old Bashyam Ravichandar in late January. They hurled threats at one another, and things eventually turned violent. Vasundhara brutally stabbed her husband to death and decapitated him. She then hand-delivered his head to the authorities, where she set the bag on a table and surrendered for the crime. The couple's 20-year-old son was not at home when the brutal slaying occurred. Police charged Vasundhara with murder and rushed the couple's home to retrieve the rest of the victim's remains. Neighbors told investigators that they had overheard the pair arguing a lot over the last year or so, but I'm sure nobody imagined that it would go as far as it did. Number 7. Svetlana Boyarinova. While barbecuing with some friends in Russia's Chelyabinsk region a few years ago, 27-year-old Svetlana Boyarinova began accusing her boyfriend, Evgeny Solyanik, of cheating on her. This was nothing new. Boyarinova frequently hurled allegations of infidelity at Solyanik, who constantly denied having a wandering eye. But Svetlana took things too far that day. She allegedly threw rocks at her boyfriend and then threw herself on top of him. Then, she stabbed him in the chest with a 2-foot-long skewer. Svetlana immediately pulled the skewer out and took Solyanik to the hospital, where he was treated and released. The couple went back to the gathering and continued their day as usual. By the following morning, the injured man's condition had worsened to the point where Svetlana rushed him back to the emergency room. As it turned out, his heart and lungs were punctured from the attack. Doctors performed emergency surgery, but it was too late to save Solyanik's life. He died during the procedure. Svetlana confessed to stabbing her boyfriend and was charged with manslaughter. She received a 6.5-year prison sentence and was ordered to compensate the victim's family. The crazed killer argued in court that doctors were responsible for Solyanik's death because they had failed to treat him properly. But it was clear that Svetlana had a serious jealousy problem. In fact, it wasn't the first time she had stabbed the man. She apologized to Solyanik's family in court, but for them, her remorseful words were too little too late. If you were at the barbecue that day, would you have done anything to prevent what happened? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to subscribe. Number 6. Nicholas Forman and Sabrina HAROONI. 24-year-old Nicholas Forman and his girlfriend, 22-year-old Sabrina HAROONI, were on their way home from watching the Super Bowl at a local bar last year, when Sabrina received a text message from an ex-boyfriend. The Uber driver who took the couple to the Forman's home in Perkiomen Township, Pennsylvania, would later tell authorities that a vicious argument broke out between the two. The fight continued after they were dropped off. By then, the Uber driver had become so concerned for Sabrina's safety that he stayed in the driveway for a few minutes. Forman allegedly demanded to see his girlfriend's phone, telling her that he wouldn't let her leave until he saw it. The noise eventually stopped. Figuring everything had calmed down, the Uber driver left. Forman beat Sabrina to death and recorded a video of himself taunting her while she was unresponsive, stating, "This is what a cheating liar gets." The next day, he ordered an Uber, loaded Sabrina's dead body into the car, and had the driver taken to the hospital, where she was pronounced dead. Forman told the police that 3 women had attacked her, but they didn't buy the story. He was convicted of first-degree murder and received a life sentence. Number 5. HIMANSHU M. TANNA. 59-year-old HIMANSHU M. TANNA and his wife of 40 years owned a beer and wine store in Montgomery County, Maryland. They recently got into a disagreement over the future of the business, and its lease was about to expire. The husband was reportedly against renewing the lease, but his 59-year-old wife, Alka H. TANNA, insisted that they should renew. After owning the store for 3 years, they had run into financial problems. The pair were also arguing because the $200,000 in cash they had stashed away in the home was dwindling. Alka was allegedly taking money from the rainy day fund and wouldn't tell Himanshu what she was spending it on. While running errands recently, the couple stopped at Capital One Bank so that Alka could make a deposit while Himanshu waited in the car. When she exited the business, he ran her over with their SUV, killing her and crashing the vehicle into a pole. Alka was pronounced dead at the scene. Himanshu supposedly confessed to the crime and faces a first-degree murder charge. Customers who have been leaving flowers outside the couple's liquor store keep relaying similar statements to news reporters that Alka was a nice woman, but her husband was known to be curt and rude. Number 4. An almost murder-suicide. A 22-year-old woman in Delhi, India, narrowly escaped with her life recently when her husband stabbed her at least 30 times in a fit of rage. He tracked her down at her mother's house, where she had gone to get away from him after a fight, and waited to confront her until her mom had left the house to go grocery shopping. The enraged man viciously slashed his wife's face and neck at least 30 times with a surgical blade before taking his own life, thinking she was dead. But the woman miraculously survived, receiving a much-deserved second chance at life. Relatives told investigators that the couple had a history of getting into petty arguments and that they thought a trivial disagreement probably sparked the tragic attack. The suspect initially evaded police, but they caught up with him at a vacant home owned by his brother-in-law, where he was hiding out. His family told detectives that he has a drug problem and that his relationship with his wife was strained. They also said that the victim would often complain to them about her husband's behavior. Domestic violence is a major problem in India, where cases like this frequently make news headlines. Clinical psychologist Rajat Mitra told the Hindustan Times that India's legal and criminal justice systems view domestic violence as something that happens within the privacy of someone's home, and that couples should be left to sort the disagreements out by going to marriage counseling. Sadly, this isn't always the case. Mitra pointed out that roughly 30% of India's domestic violence cases can't be solved by conventional means. This is especially evident in cases where a partner is especially suspicious of the other or has a mental disorder that makes them prone to violent outbursts. He advised that a person should immediately leave the relationship at the first sign of violence, and almost any expert would agree that he's absolutely right. Number 3. Shawanda Hill. Arguing while driving is never a good idea. While it's easy to think that you can carry on a serious and perhaps heated discussion while focusing on the road, getting your emotions worked up while operating a vehicle never ends well. 51-year-old Sehevan A. Solo L and his wife, 45-year-old Shawanda Hill, are a good example of why. They got into a disagreement late last year while traveling on a highway in Bedford County, Virginia, in the middle of the night. Shawanda was driving when Sehevan allegedly pushed the steering wheel, causing the car to run off the road and overturn. He was ejected from the vehicle and died. According to police, he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. His wife sustained minor injuries, but she could face a world of other problems. At the time of the accident, Virginia State Police said that they were considering charges against Shawanda for reckless driving. Number 2. Olga Volkova and Yevgeny Karlagin. When a couple is caught up in the heat of an argument, it's easy for them to forget about their surroundings. In the case of Olga Volkova and Yevgeny Karlagin, they became so oblivious that they put their own safety at risk. The couple, who have a young son together, was arguing on a second-floor balcony in St. Petersburg, Russia last year, when they leaned on the railing and fell 25 feet onto the concrete below. A bystander with medical training took their pulses, and it turned that they were both alive. Both Volkova and Karlagin were rushed to the hospital with a few broken limbs, but not any serious life-threatening injuries. The St. Petersburg State Prosecutor's Office said that it was looking into whether the balcony was structurally unsound. An onlooker who captured the frightening incident on camera told the press that they were filming the city's historic scenery when they heard the disagreement and hit the record button. Footage of the terrifying plunge went viral online, reminding us all to be careful about where we get into our next argument. Number 1. Spaghetti Spat. 45-year-old Stephanie Lannis and her 35-year-old boyfriend, Adolfo Rivera, were enjoying some dinner and drinks last summer at their Clearwater, Florida home when an argument broke out. They'd probably had a little too much to drink, and things quickly became violent, with the pair allegedly shoving their plates of spaghetti into one another's faces. Police arrived at the scene around 1 in the morning and found the couple still covered in their food. They were both arrested for domestic violence and spent the night in jail. A judge released them on their own recognizance and permitted them to continue having contact. Like many couples who find themselves in trouble with the law for taking their fights too far, this wasn't Lannis and Rivera's first run-in with the police. During another drunken fight in late 2020, Stephanie was arrested for stabbing Rivera in the arm. She was initially charged with felony aggravated battery, but the case was dropped while she dealt with several narcotics possessions charges. Number 10. Cash to Dubai. A British woman was caught smuggling millions of dollars of cash to the country of Dubai. Before I say why somebody would do this, let's first take a look at our criminal. Her name is Tara Hanlon from Leeds. She was caught with £9 million hidden in 5 suitcases while trying to move through London's Heathrow Airport. She was detained by the airport authorities, who then discovered this was her 4th smuggling trip. They had missed her the first 3 times, and can only guess at how much cash she managed to get out of the country. This was supposed to be her final trip in October of 2020, after completing her other 3 smuggling jobs in the summer. Because she didn't want to make any more trips, she decided to go a bit overboard with the cash and bring as much as she could humanly carry. This was ultimately what got her busted. When asked what the purpose of her visit was, she said it was a girls' trip. She said the 5 suitcases were because she didn't know what to wear while in Dubai. This was incredibly suspicious, so the border officers searched her stuff and found the money. Then they searched her phone and got the full story. This was not Tara's money, but rather money being laundered by an international criminal organization. Investigators believe she was only one moving piece in a much larger network of couriers traveling frequently between Britain and Dubai with massive cash bundles. For her to bring all that money, she only got paid about $3,000 by her criminal employer. Number 9. Meth at the airport. On October 11, 2017, a man named David Arredondo was indicted by a grand jury on charges of conspiracy to import methamphetamine. He was busted trying to smuggle a shocking amount of meth across an international bridge. It was like something out of an episode of Breaking Bad. David showed up at the Juarez-Lincoln International Bridge in his 2009 GMC Sierra. As he was approaching the Customs and Border Protection inspection area, the Border Patrol agents noticed that there were weird sounds coming from his wheels. Wanting to be thorough, they pulled out the X machine and looked inside. Inside, they discovered 32 packages in hidden compartments in his wheels. These 32 packages contained a total of 126 pounds of pure methamphetamine. For those who don't buy meth by the pound, this is worth roughly $2.5 million on the street. Somebody somewhere lost a lot of money. When questioned by Homeland Security agents, David eventually admitted to visiting a tire shop while in Mexico. He said he had his tires and rims changed. He said that must have been when the sneaky criminals stuffed the meth into his vehicle. He claims he had nothing to do with it. He says he didn't even notice the weird noises his tires were making. He can deny it all he wants, but if convicted on the smuggling charges, David will probably go to jail for the rest of his life. Number 8. The Bad Olympian. Nathan Bagley was the Olympic kayaker from Australia who got busted smuggling over $150 million worth of cocaine. It was actually Nathan and his brother Drew who participated in the smuggling operation together, and they were both arrested in 2018. They were caught by authorities after a dramatic police chase on the water involving both the Australian Navy and Air Force. Nathan purchased the boat to be used in the smuggling operation. Then his brother and another man named Anthony traveled 11 hours in June to meet a foreign ship loaded with drugs. What they didn't realize was that they had been spotted by surveillance planes and were followed. Footage captured Drew Bagley tossing massive packages of cocaine overboard, while Anthony tried to steer the boat away from the cops. Long story short, it didn't work. When questioned, Drew said he thought he was picking up tobacco and that he had actually been kidnapped by Anthony. Anthony, on the other hand, gave up both Bagley brothers and managed to get himself a reduced sentence for importing cocaine. Nathan, a double silver medalist at the Athens Olympics, was involved with the plan in that he purchased the boat and outfitted it for smuggling. He was given 25 years in jail. Plus, this wasn't the first time the brothers had been busted on drug-related offenses. In 2009, both of them got caught trying to start a drug manufacturing group, producing hallucinogenic tablets to be sold on the street. Number 7. The Russian Smuggler. Paul Whelan was arrested in Russia on December 28, 2018, for allegedly being a spy. Paul was a US citizen, but also held citizenship in Canada, the United Kingdom, and Ireland. He was given a prison sentence of 16 years in 2020, but not before the Russians offered to give him back to the US in exchange for a Russian prisoner being held in America, Konstantin Yuroshenko. Konstantin served 3 years in the Russian military, worked at a Soviet factory, and struggled to make money in the years following the collapse of the Soviet Union. The little money he could make was on the flight crews in Africa or driving a taxi at home. In 2010, a transportation job came his way that would pay big bucks. He met his contact in March of 2010, a man calling himself Nabil Hage. Constantine was given the option to make millions of dollars if he would simply transport huge amounts of cocaine from South America to Liberia. That's in North Africa. The drugs are then spread from Liberia into other parts of Africa, up into Europe, and some into the United States. What the Russian smuggler didn't know at the time was that he was talking to two confidential sources working with the Drug Enforcement Administration, or the DEA. 2 months later, Constantine moved to smuggle tons of cocaine from Venezuela to Africa. But before he ever could, the DEA came crashing down and arrested everyone involved. The issue for Constantine was that he got in on the operation at the very end of a long and grueling investigation by the DEA. He basically walked through the door on the last day of the operations and got 20 years in an American jail for smuggling. This is despite the fact he didn't technically ship any cocaine from anywhere. He'd only agreed to do it. The Russians have been trying to get him back for ages. After they arrested the alleged spy Paul Whelan, they tried to trade him for Constantine. But of course, the US doesn't trade prisoners. Do you think the US should trade Russian-held prisoners for Americans being held in Russian prisons? Let us know your thoughts on this complicated topic in the comments below. And don't forget to hit subscribe before the end of the video. Number 6. Cocaine shoes. On May 2nd, 2021, a woman was arrested in Atlanta after returning from a trip to Jamaica. She was caught red-handed at the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, smuggling $40,000 worth of cocaine in her shoes. Not the shoes she was wearing, but 7 pairs of shoes she had in her luggage. When the US Customs and Border Protection officers started poking through her belongings, they noticed there was something off about the shoes. The shoes peeled open to reveal a white, powdery substance concealed in the bottoms. The substance was tested and came back positive for cocaine. The suspect, an unidentified woman from Georgia who was only 21 years old, was sent to the Clayton County Police Department. Number 5. Homemade submarine. A man from Colombia had been blasted for the second time trying to smuggle drugs across international borders. What makes this case truly special is that the smuggler was using a homemade submarine. A submarine he made by himself specifically to smuggle cocaine from South America into the United States. The smuggler's name is Jose Rosario Seguera Balentiera. He was captured by the United States Coast Guard near the border of Mexico in August of 2020. When the Coast Guards entered this submersible vessel, a rough metal tube painted green, they found 4,400 pounds of cocaine. When sold on the street, that turns out to be a profit of about $35 million. But the truly shocking part is that this wasn't the first time Jose had gotten in trouble for using a submarine for smuggling. He got caught in 2019 as well, but managed to get himself back to Colombia and fashion himself a new submarine. Alas, his second attempt was an even bigger failure. He has since been sentenced to 16 years in prison, where there's just no way he'll be able to make himself a third submarine. Number 4. Migrants in coffins. A man from Galveston, Texas was busted smuggling migrants into the country. This kind of thing happens all the time, but this case was unique. Zachary Taylor Blood thought that a little bit of patriotism might help him get away with the smuggling. On October 26, 2021, he drove a modified van for transporting caskets to the border checkpoint near Falfurrias. The border security agents asked what he was transporting, and he replied, "A dead Navy guy." But the border agents weren't buying it. The coffin was in terrible condition, and the American flag had been fixed to the top with cheap packing tape. When the border agents opened the coffin to see what was inside, they found a pair of Mexicans. The Mexican nationals admitted to paying the smuggler to get them to San Antonio. For his participation in the human smuggling, Zachary Blood is facing 5 years in a federal prison. Number 3. Live finches. Francis Gurahu was caught in 2019 trying to smuggle live finches through the JFK airport in New York. Yes, he was literally smuggling birds, tiny finches that he was planning to sell for $3,000 each. 39-year-old Francis had 3 dozen of them, still alive, fresh from Africa. He'd picked the finches up on a trip to Guyana and then stuffed them in his carry-on luggage on the return flight to New York. Each finch was hidden inside of a plastic hair curler. It would be like if somebody tied you up with rope and shoved you into a plastic tube, then stuffed you in a dark potato sack. For these birds, it was absolutely horrible. They went from flying around free and wild to being jammed in plastic hair curlers by a very mean man. But here's where things get even weirder. Francis was trying to sell the finches to people in New York who used them in competitions. Finches are highly valuable birds in New York as they participate in singing contests. People have their prized finches sing, while others place bets on which bird will have the best voice. It's a really bizarre underground thing, like cockfighting, but even weirder. With a total of 32 live finches, Francis was hoping to make over $100,000. Instead, he was charged with unlawful wildlife smuggling. His birds were taken away and will hopefully end up being taken care of in a bird sanctuary somewhere. Number 2. Death in Vietnam. A Nigerian football player named Theophilus Ugwu was sentenced to death on Tuesday, May 25, 2021. As you may already know, some countries have much harsher sentences when it comes to drug smuggling than others. The football player, a young man of just 23 years old, was busted trafficking methamphetamine from Cambodia into Vietnam in March of 2020. He had 12 bags filled to the brim with crystal meth, enough for Vietnamese authorities to deem his life forfeit. But the story of Theophilus is actually pretty tragic. He first arrived in Cambodia in February of 2020 to play soccer. He met some fellow Africans who said they could help him make a bit of extra cash to deliver a package from the capital city Phnom Penh to Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam would earn him $1,000. That is a significant amount of money in Cambodia and can keep a person going for months. He accepted the deal, went across the border, and was caught immediately. He claimed he didn't know the package had drugs in it, but that didn't fly. He's due to be executed any day now. Number 1. Smuggling on Instagram. A Canadian woman who posted about a drug smuggling trip on Instagram just spent 4.5 years in prison. She was one of 2 Canadian women documenting their luxurious cruise trip to Australia via Instagram when they got caught with $23 million worth of cocaine. According to what Crown Prosecutor Tom Muir said during her sentencing, Melina Roberge knew exactly what she was doing when it came to smuggling drugs. She was doing it to support her lavish lifestyle. She enjoyed living a life of luxury, and that was what smuggling was all about to her. She broke down and cried in the courtroom, but only because she got caught. At just 24 years old, Melina was hauled off to jail as an international criminal. The case blew up in 2016 when Melina and her 2 accomplices docked in Sydney and were busted by the police. No amount of happy Instagram photos could cover up what they were doing. You see, they had tried to disguise their trip by posting vacation photos, when the reality was much different. When the ship stopped in Peru, Melanie and 2 other Canadian women picked up a massive load of cocaine to take to Australia. But when they docked in Sydney, a sniffer dog found the drugs in their cabin, and it was game over. On May 29, 2021, Melina finished her Australian prison term and was deported back to Canada. She's hoping to keep a low profile from now on and stay away from drug smuggling. What do you think pushes seemingly ordinary people into drug smuggling? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and thanks for watching. Come back soon for more, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the newest videos. See you next time. Bye!